People paying money to see me in a 20x20 ring.
Welcome back to the 20x20 Ring Crew. I am your host, Joe, and he is not here this week. I'm giving Matt the week off after our 1-year anniversary. Again, thank you guys so much for supporting and listening to the show. We work hard. We really do. Week after week, we try to... I hate to sound like another podcast, but we try to insert logic where there is no logic. We try to approach pro wrestling each and every week from a logical standpoint. And I know that's really hard to do sometimes because you have a lot of people's difference of opinions and thought processes that go into booking pro wrestling or sports entertainment. That's where you fans come in. A lot of you guys have very strong opinions about what you want to watch, and we support that. We definitely support that here at the 20x20 Ring Crew. This week, we're going to try something a little bit different. Again, Matt has the week off. Get rest and take it easy, my brother. But we're going to do a watch along, if you guys don't mind. This is episode 51, and we're going to take a look back at the WWF In Your House pay-per-view St. Valentine's Day Massacre 1999. Of course, in honor of Valentine's Day, which this show should be airing the day after. So, we hope you guys had a lovely Valentine's Day, and you got to hang out with people you love and care about. This podcast is like an afterthought of that. This is for all you wrestling fans who may not have had the opportunity to enjoy something pro wrestling related and might have wanted to. So, if you don't have the WWE Network, which we'll be using for this podcast, you can get your own subscription through us and support the show. You can do that by going to 20x20crew.com/podcast/WWE Network. And that's all one word. There's no spaces, no hyphens, nothing like that. And what we're going to do is, once you have logged on to the WWE Network, find yourself in your house. It isn't In Your House pay-per-view, but it's under St. Valentine's Day Massacre for whatever reason. This is the 27th In Your House pay-per-view that the WWF would put on. It happened February 14th. February 14th of 1999 in the Pyramid, Memphis, Tennessee. Attendance was about 19,028 people, give or take. And this was one of those weird schedules where this was actually followed the day after a Saturday Night Raw. One of the few times during Raw's long, tumultuous television relationship with us fans, where you had Monday Night Raw happening on a different night. Keep in mind when in years past, they've been preempted by the big dog show that happens every year. I forget, it escapes, the name of it escapes me. But there's been those preemptive reasonings before and other stuff. But so yeah, this pay-per-view is happening right after a Saturday Night Raw. So it was back-to-back shows. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna queue it up. So make sure you have your network subscription up and running. Find yourself St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Again, I would look that up as opposed to In Your House. And we're going to hit play. And I'm going to start it at 4 seconds in. So the timer says 0004. So we have the graphics, the old WWF graphics, which those are always really interesting to me, especially now. You see the countdown, the old timey countdown, black and white, scratchy film going, and you have bits of Austin versus McMahon going on at this point in time. This production, man, this is one thing I really like about the Attitude Era that can easily be done today with today's version of Raw and any WWE product. And I don't think they do that very well. I don't think they step outside the box. Like, to me, everything is clean, real crisp. They don't, for lack of a better phrasing, they don't take chances like this with their video production. And don't get me wrong, they still have great video packages, but you don't see stuff like this. You just don't. There's no like outside the box approach to video vignettes like this. And it's sad because it does make their television, whether it be pay-per-view or television or what have you, on demand, it makes it much more interesting, you know? As we continue to see Austin and McMahon just beat the hell out of each other in the video clips here. So now it's switched to color. And again, you see the likes of the Corporation and a bloody Steve Austin. And this one is sponsored by Western Union. I've always been interested in some of the sponsors that they have chose for pay-per-views over the years. Obviously, Western Union's not that really interesting to most people. But, yeah, you know, it's always like Snickers, M&M, things like that. Here we see the crowd. Tons and tons of signs. I can't speak enough about signage, man. I do and I don't. I miss signs and I don't miss signs. There's the banner live from Memphis as they pan over the crowd. I was always a fan, I'm still a fan of watching people's signs, like some of the shit they come up with. But also, you know, it's one of those things like of a bygone era. They're not, I mean, you can still see signs here and there sprinkled throughout different pay-per-views and television appearances, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. And it's a shame, you know, we live in the day and age of people voicing their opinion, especially as fans, and we just don't see it very often. And I've heard from other people where the WWE, I can't speak for other promotions, but I've heard people who've attended the WWE shows that they are not shy about confiscating certain signs. So maybe that's the reason why we don't see too many on television. You have Goldust coming out to the ring now, and he's feuding with the Blue Meanie. Before we get to Goldust and Blue Meanie, or Blue Dust as it were, this pay-per-view had one dark match, and that was it was a tag team match between Too Much, who consists of Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor, or as he likes to be called, Scotty Too Hotty. They defeated the Hardy Boys here in 1999, and you know, a lot of people can say a lot of stuff about the tag team of Too Much. You know, Brian Christopher, hell of a wrestler, whether you liked his gimmick or not. Same with Scott Taylor. Guys are straight out of Memphis wrestling, and before any of you sit there and say, oh, you know, just these are just some more fucking Southern wrestlers and they're jobbers, you got to keep in mind that the WWF at this point, they're doing what they've always done, and they water their talent down. And it's a shame because both Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor are excellent professional wrestlers. They were just paid to be a certain way, and that's what they did, and they tried to make the best of it. So that was the only dark match. And then on Sunday Night Heat, you had two pre-show matches. The first one was Viscera along with Midian at ringside. He defeated Test, who had Big Boss Man with him, by disqualification. That ended in about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And then the second pre-show match that happened on Sunday Night Heat was Billy Gunn with Triple H and X-Pac, of course, DX, who we're talking about here, versus Tiger Ali Singh, and it ended up in a no contest, and it also ended in about 40 seconds. Really quick pre-show match. Sunday Night Heat pre-show matches, quite honestly, I couldn't tell you one that I really, really liked, except for, and I don't even think it was a pre-pay-per-view thing, where the Alkalites beat the piss out of Public Enemy, but that's another story for another time. So here we have Goldust coming in. They just showed the package leading up to their feud, or, you know, what had transpired in the days beforehand, where Blue Meanie basically painted Goldust with blue paint, And Blue Meanie comes out, and obviously he's a portly fellow at this point in his career. In my notes, I have basically like, was this guy wearing any fucking underwear? And it bothers me. It really does bother me, because it's not. I don't think anybody would really like to see Blue Meanie's junk. I'm being honest here. Goldust makes pretty quick work of Blue Dust here. Match ends in about 3 minutes and 4 seconds. Leading up to this match, you had the leader of the Job Squad, which was Al Snow, and his mascot Head. You guys remember Head? Head was stolen from him by Goldust, who ended up restyling it and kind of keeping it with his own makeup style, which was definitely an odd take on a storyline, but it worked, I would say. On the January 25th, 1999 edition of Raw, the Blue Meanie made his debut, and he came through the crowd, and he stole the head back from Goldust for Al Snow. And then the following week, on February 1st, Goldust attacked Blue Meanie, and the night before the event, again, on this special Saturday Night Raw, Goldust lost a match to Gilbert. You guys remember Gilbert? When the Blue Meanie distracted him with a video parodying him, renaming himself Blue Dust. And so after the match was over, the arena went dark with a blue hue similar to Goldust's entrance, and then Goldust was disgraced by having this blue paint poured all over him. I have a lot of feelings about Goldust. First of all, I gotta sit here and say, Dustin Reynolds, completely underrated performer, and he will forever be that. I really, really would like to do an all Goldust episode of this podcast. I think a lot of you need to appreciate and understand Goldust for more than what most people take him as. With that being said, Blue Meanie misses getting back to the match here, Blue Meanie misses a moonsault, and here's where the underwear part comes in. So Goldust lifts him up and kind of forward slams him and pins him. Again, this is only about 3 minutes and 4 seconds. Really quick match. But when he picks him up, his onesie, his romper, I guess, man, he was so close to having his junk show, and like, no offense, I don't want to see that. And it doesn't have anything to do with his weight. Like, I'm just not in the mood to see some guy's junk. I'm just not. Blue Meanie gets set up here in the corner of the ring for another Shattered Dreams after the match is over, and the ref is begging him, please don't do it, but he does it anyway. So Blue Meanie, there's really not much to say about Blue Meanie here in the WWF. I feel like this was one of those ECW guys that they signed so that he wouldn't go anywhere else, or something to that nature. And they just, they underutilized him. So Goldust is leaving the ring, and that's about it. Here now they're showing a Sunday Night Heat video package that happened earlier tonight, where you see Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels in the ring, and they're waiting for Stone Cold to come out. Stone Cold, if you don't know, this is the main event of the show. It's going to be Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon in a steel cage, and Stone Cold basically said he's going to make Vince McMahon bleed. He's going to make him pay with his own blood. So this is one of those feuds, as we see Austin get spit put on his face by Vince McMahon. This is one of those feuds that just resonates with everyone, because it's you all of you, whether you like it or not, you all identify it as you're getting to give your boss the business. You're telling your boss off. That's what that Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon feud does for everyone. It fulfills that fantasy, and that's why it was so wildly popular. Man, what a great fucking idea. And it almost happened by like a happy accident. If you guys don't know, it was not necessarily planned, and it just kind of happened organically, which, man, I wish the WWF, or WWE now, would approach things more that way. Let things happen organically. I think a lot of their TV and pay-per-views would be better if they just kind of let things go with the flow, as long as it makes sense for the story. Getting back to the pay-per-view here, we have our second match of the night. You have Hardcore Bob Holly taking on Al Snow with Head, and this is for the vacant Hardcore title. How did the vacant How did the vacancy happen? Well, in the first few weeks of 1999, you had the Road Dogg and Al Snow. They had formed kind of like a hardcore tag team, but after they lost to the Alkalites, they had a dispute, and Al Snow challenged Road Dogg to a fight. And it was about being who was more hardcore. So when the Road Dogg was attacked backstage and he couldn't fight anymore, Al Snow began to have a match with himself by hitting himself with weapons, moonsaulting onto a table. It was definitely a sight to see. And his fellow Job Squad member Bob Holly came to the ring and tried to talk some sense into him, and then he found himself brawling with Al Snow instead. So when it was discovered that the attack on Road Dogg would prevent him from defending that hardcore championship, a match between both Al Snow and Hardcore Bob Holly was signed to be put on here at the pay-per-view in Memphis, St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And they don't hold back, right? We just saw Al Snow get hit with a fire extinguisher and what looks to be either a coffee mug or a beer bottle. I can't tell. Something glass. They're fighting near the entranceway, and there goes Al Snow again with this time he's giving the fire extinguisher to Bob Holly as opposed to taking it, and they are definitely making their way to the back, beating the piss out of each other as two hardcore combatants should be doing. This match is all over the fucking building. They go outside. They're into all kinds of shit. They end up in, I forget what river it is. Yeah, they they end up in water outside in the fucking frigid cold air. I don't know how anybody puts up with shit like that. Here we have Al Snow doing the payphone spot. Call somebody as he hits him with the receiver. Hardcore wrestling. I know a lot of you are fans of it, and I don't mind it. But I think just like with everything in life, it has a double edge. For all you fans of hardcore wrestling, you have to understand that this does take a toll, more of a toll than a normal wrestling match on the wrestlers or sports entertainers, whatever you're watching. Whether we like it or not, we're all human. And you have to worry about things like concussions and, cuts, bruises, scrapes, infection, transmittable diseases, things like that. And don't get me wrong, man, I'm not above watching hardcore wrestling. I attended ECW shows when it was around. I love watching hardcore wrestling. It also paints any promotion that puts it on into a corner, because now once you have it, it's like painting yourself into a corner, because once you do it, you can't take any of it back. And usually what happens with your audience or the crowd, they end up wanting more. They want it to keep being elevated. If we see one table, now they want 3 tables. If you see 2 chair shots, next time they want to see 6 chair shots. And while this can all be entertaining, it really does not only shorten the lifespan of a wrestler's career. Eventually it just becomes senseless, and you as a fan get desensitized to it, and a lot of you guys don't seem to understand it or be willing to accept it, whatever the case may be. And that's kind of the shame of all this, because hardcore wrestling, if done right and done sporadically with meaning, it can be such an awesome thing for a promotion. This resonates right now, 20 years later. We have the birth of All Elite Wrestling, and obviously, as of this podcast, they have not done a show yet. Their Double or Nothing pay-per-view happens on, I believe, May 25th of 2019, so they have yet to announce any kind of hardcore thing as part of the show. Although, at this point, Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho seemingly have been signed as part of the double main event, so I could see that being a little hardcore. But it's going to be interesting to see the future of hardcore wrestling when it comes to All Elite Wrestling. If and when they showcase it, how will the WWF react? Will we get to see more hardcore stuff? Will it become kind of like a point of interest for everybody again? I don't know. I'm not so sure how this is going to go. Back to the match, though. They have made their way outside. Bob Holly just hit Al Snow with a gigantic stop sign it's like mounted on a metal bracket. And now he's got a wheelbarrow. And they're beating the piss out of each other outside with all kinds of stuff. They have yet to go in the water. They're close. There goes Bob Holly into the wheelbarrow, wheelbarrow. I really loved the idea of the Job Squad. Again, the Job Squad was one of those stories or factions, both story and faction, that was brought to the attention of the WWE by Al Snow. This was Al Snow's creation, and I felt that it really had a place. I think it didn't get a proper backing. I think they just didn't give it enough rocket fuel strapped to them, and it sucks because it would have given a lot more meaning to any of the hardcore stuff that happened in the WWF at the time. Now they're on the bank of the river as Bob Holly's being choked out by Al Snow, and here we go. We are now in the water. I think this is the only one that I remember being in the water. I don't remember any other hardcore matches being in any kind of body of water or river or what have you. You're more than welcome to correct me. You can do that via Twitter. We're on Twitter at 20x20crew. But yeah, I don't remember too many matches of any sort being in the water. It's interesting to me that they go through a match like this kind of match gets booked and done on a pay-per-view, mind you. And the entire time you will have tons of people, including WWE management, just kind of sit there and look down and frown upon like backyard wrestling. Because to me it's like, other than obviously two professional wrestlers taking part in this match, what is the difference? You're out there in the elements. You're in a fucking river, for crying out loud. Really, other than having two professionals as opposed to two amateurs do this, what really is the difference? Any guy, any woman can take, or any child can pick up a tree branch and beat the piss out of someone. Anyone can dump someone into a wheelbarrow. Anyone can throw someone else into a river. Like, seriously, what's the difference? I think people need to get off their high horse and just accept the fact that this is the same shit. It's just different people doing it. Now we see Bob Holly wrapping Al Snow up in some chain link fencing, and he pins him for the 3 count. That's how the match was won. And Hardcore Holly's like, fuck this shit, I'm going back in because it's fucking cold. So he's kind of running back inside the building. The Hardcore title, really quick before we move on to the next match. The Hardcore title, for those of you who don't know, take a really close look at the belt. A lot of people think this is the actual, like the pieces of the belt that are on the main faceplate. A lot of people tend to believe that those are the pieces of the title belt that was held by Hulk Hogan years ago that got broke by, I want to say it was Mr. Perfect. I think Mr. Perfect stole it at one point and took it to the back or the locker room area, and he took a hammer to it. That is incorrect. While that did happen, those are not the pieces that were used to make the Hardcore title. Those pieces, those actual pieces, were actually sold to a private collector. If you guys listen to the Bruce Pritchard podcast, Something to Wrestle With, there's a point on one of the episodes where it is confirmed that one of their sponsors who makes title belts for a living, I believe it's Leather by Dan, he owns the actual pieces of the broken Hogan title. So this Hardcore title is yes, it is a hodgepodge of broken title pieces, but it is not the title pieces that were from the Hulk Hogan belt. So the Hardcore match is over, and again they're showing a video vignette from earlier that day where you see Undertaker and all his minions, including Viscera, Edge, and Christian, or I should say the Brood. All 3 of them are there. You have Paul Bearer there. And they are all huddled around a fire, and they're taking instructions from the Undertaker. And this video package is leading us to a match between Big Boss Man and Mideon. And if you guys are keeping tabs, Big Boss Man is pulling double duty on this show, as he did wrestle earlier in the evening during Sunday Night Heat in that pre-show match. And here we see Boss Man as part of the corporation. He comes out first, and we get to see the Boss Man that is more, he's not donning his classic Boss Man look with the Cobb County, Georgia police force uniform. He's actually all kind of like all black black gloves, black nightstick. Like he's like a tactical officer at this point. Kind of reminds you of like Stryker from Mortal Kombat, except redneck. Bossman, another one of those wrestlers who completely capable of being more than a fucking, mid-carder at best. He's got all the wrestling experience behind him. Same with Midian. And they're here in the WWF at this point, and they're being paid to be a gimmick, and it's sad, man. It really is sad. I wish there were more viable paying options that kept these guys financially stable so that they could be elsewhere and be able to be actual pro wrestlers, because it would have been really cool to fucking see these guys have at it. Right off the top of my head, I don't remember where Midian came up from, what organizations he was associated with before he got into the WWF, but I know the Big Boss Man was Big Bubba Rogers in the NWA, and you got to see glimpses of him actually wrestle, and wrestle well, when he was Big Bubba Rogers. He got brought in back then as just a bodyguard to Jim Cornette for the Midnight Express, but he eventually grew to have his own matches and stuff, and you got to see Ray Traylor, aka the Big Boss Man, aka Bubba Rogers, actually wrestle, and he works well. He works really, really well. I think a lot of people underestimate him and Midian. But Midian comes out second, and he brings it, getting back to the match here, Midian comes out second. He brings a jar of what is supposed to be formaldehyde, and it has an eyeball in it. And he hands it off to Jerry the King Lawler, who's at ringside, and he tells him to take care of this. And in true King fashion, he remarks something to the effect of, I'm keeping an eye on you, or something like that. Something cheesy and very pun-worthy. But these two go about a little over 6 minutes, and I bring up all this this talk about them two being actual workers, as we see Bossman tell the fans to kiss his ass, and then takes a lariat in the corner, like a lariat from hell from Midian. I bring all this up with these guys being two awesome workers, just kind of watered down, because the fans start to chant boring during the match. Whether you're a professional wrestler, or you're in a fucking spelling bee, or you're public speaking, the last thing you want to hear or be a part of is someone chanting that you're boring. Even now, if I was doing this in front of a live audience, the last thing I would want was for people to sit here and call me boring, or this podcast boring, because that is not my intention. And I think it speaks volumes to the product at this point. You have two guys who are willing to do what they came to do, and that's entertain the crowd. And partly because of their gimmick, and partly because of the time and instruction that they're given, they don't get to do that necessarily. They try like hell, don't get me wrong, but if the fans are chanting boring, there's definitely a problem. And I think over the course of my viewership and fandom of professional wrestling, I think I've heard more boring chants from WWE/WWF product than I've heard anywhere else in my entire life. And it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of this match, we do see the Ministry come out like in full force, and they take Bossman. They pretty much kidnap him, or Bossman nap him, however you want to refer to it. But it's one of those storylines. You have the Ministry, you have the corporation. I don't like to speak ill of these factions, because they definitely played a part in the history of the WWF, big parts. I think it came to a point where you had so many guys that they didn't know what to do with. They were like, hey, we're just gonna stick you in this faction or that faction, and we'll alter your character to make sense, like they did with the Big Boss Man and Midian, of course, because if I'm not mistaken, he used to be one of the Godwins, so now he's just like an evil redneck. You get all these characters, and then you just get them piled on into different factions. They really don't, it doesn't really mesh well with the audience. You're kind of there, and you're subjected to it whether you want to be or not. And I think that's part of where the fans' reaction of boring comes into play with this match and these storylines. It's just oversaturation. Now, of course, I say all this, but I do I do tend to agree with the fans. It is, they're not necessarily stinking up the joint, but it's it's definitely not what Meltzer would call a 5-star match. But they certainly are trying, and I will definitely give them an A for effort if we have to abide by some sort of ratings system. Again, we're doing a watch-along on this episode. We are Mattless this week. He is taking a mini vacation, and during this watch-along, we're watching the WWF In Your House number 27, St. Valentine's Day Massacre. We're watching the Big Boss Man take on Midian. We're about 34 minutes and 20, 21, 22 seconds into it as Boss Man goes and gets the pin on Midian, thus ending the match. And now we will see the Ministry come out and kidnap the Boss Man. You have Edge, Christian, both of the Acolytes. Oh, I forgot that the place goes dark, and here comes the Undertaker's music and video, and of course he'll come out now and kind of supervise the kidnapping of the Boss Man here. As of this recording, we're hearing that the Undertaker might be calling it quits for good. He is currently not scheduled for a lot of events this year, including all of the Saudi Arabia shows that are supposed to go on this year, 2019. I, for one, am torn as a fan. I really love The Undertaker and that character. I also think he is over the hill, and he has had his time, and if they were to utilize him, they need to do it sparingly and with much more intent and meat, and I really don't think we're ever going to see that done effectively at this point. I really do hope he retires and he stays retired. I know for a lot of guys, it's hard to quit the business. I mean, think about it. If you do something for so long, myself included, I was in the grocery business for 23 years. It's hard. It's hard to give something up like that. Just kind of be done with it. I get it, but he really needs to just stop. So here they beat up the Boss Man, and they're carrying him out like pallbearers do. There's 3 or 4 guys on each side, and he's elevated, and they're walking him back to the backstage. Pallbearers there with Midian, formaldehyde preserved eyeball in the glass jar, and they steal the Boss Man. And now we cut to another video package. I believe this is for WrestleMania, maybe? The showcase of the Immortals being televised here. Yes, WrestleMania live on March 28th, sponsored by M&M's. Now they're backstage, and we see Kevin Kelly. Wow, how far has Kevin Kelly come? He is backstage trying to interview D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and Ivory, who during the pre-show, during Sunday Night Heat, Ivory got into it with Deborah, and so now this is kind of a intergender match, I suppose. This is our 4th match of the night, and it officially is going to be Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart with Deborah, who are currently tag team champions, and they're going to go up against D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry with Ivory, and the match is for the tag team championship, and I believe we are going to see Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown with Ivory come out first. Yes, they come out first. Here, Mark Henry is still doing his sexual chocolate. If I'm not mistaken and I remember correctly, he brings out like candy and flowers for Ivory once they're in the ring. To give you some background on this feud at this time, Mark Henry, he's having these delusions of grandeur, as it were, pertaining to like his overall status with the opposite sex. And so he flirts with Deborah, and she pretends to be attracted to him, because that's kind of what Deborah does. That's her gimmick. All the while, this all happens while she's managing Jeff Jarrett. And so Jeff Jarrett attacks Mark Henry from behind. And to try to prevent Deborah from further distracting Mark Henry, D'Lo Brown introduces him in hopes that Mark Henry wouldn't be distracted during their match against the tag team champs, so that they could possibly win some fucking gold here. And so, yes, as we see now, he does hand her flowers and candy, and he seems totally enamored with Ivory, which, kayfabe, Ivory wasn't bad looking, but it's the storyline. It's just, and here's my fucking favorite person in the world, Slapnuts himself, Jeff Jarrett, comes out with his fucking goddamn guitar. His t-shirt reads, "Don't piss me." He continually pisses me off. Here's a guy, even at the height of his career, he was low mid-card at best. I don't care what anybody says. If you guys as wrestling fans want to sit there and give shit to the notion of Southern, like, oh, here's another Southern wrestler, do it with Jeff Jarrett, because Jeff Jarrett really is one of those guys. Obviously, born and raised Southern wrestler, second or third generation, mind you. He's low mid-card at best. For lack of a better term, he is like stereotypical Southern wrestler. He really is jobber material. I don't understand how or why he ever got as big as he did, other than Vince Russo. Obviously, especially when he was in WCW, I think Vince Russo had a lot to do with Jeff Jarrett getting over. It's sad. It's sad to see the likes of Owen Hart, who, like, I feel bad for. Like, he's stuck with fucking Jeff Jarrett as a tag team partner. And Owen Hart is, like, it should be fucking beneath him to be wrestling with Jeff Jarrett in any capacity. But here we are, and they have fucking tag team titles around their waist, and they're defending them against Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. I just don't get it sometimes, folks. Again, this is the plight of our podcast here. You have us trying to interject logic into something seemingly unlogical. This storyline is just bordering on cockamamie. I miss Owen Hart. Definitely miss Owen Hart. And, like, wow, what could have been if he were still with us? What could have been? He had such a bright future ahead of him. Coming out of the shadow of working around his brother, being elevated to that next level of performer and performance. I think he would have done wonders for the WWF had they pushed him to become a main eventer. And if he didn't stick around for whatever reason, and he went to WCW or to a lesser extent ECW, I still think he would have definitely been one of those very impactful performers, and we would have gotten to see him perform at another level. And that is something I will always want and love, is what could have been with Owen Hart. Mark Henry's another one of those talents who came from being a strongman, an Olympic strongman, into the world of professional wrestling. And while he was trained and he did have somewhat of a wrestling background, this was still kind of foreign to him. But he's another one of those guys where he kind of got the shit end. Well, no, there was no kind of about it. He did get the shit end of the stick when it came to him being pushed. I remember, watching his push. I was happy. I was like, man, this is great. I can't wait. They're going to push him. And then they pushed him and they gave him, his first world title. And a lot of fans weren't happy because his title reign was kind of like the drizzling shits. And I agree. I definitely agree that his run was mediocre at best. And unfortunately, I think it falls on the WWE or WWF creative, where it's like, what do we do with this guy? How about you just let him be a pro wrestler? If they would have let Mark Henry be just a pro wrestler and not stuck him with shitty gimmicks like sexual chocolate, I think he would have had the same effect on the audience as a Kurt Angle, and I don't want to sit here and pigeonhole him in, or like take the easy way out with him being this, here we have another Olympic athlete and that's his persona. But you know what? It would have worked. It so would have worked. And I would have, even if his gimmick, him just being an Olympic athlete, and that's what his gimmick totally consisted of, he wouldn't have had to come to the ring in the red, white, and blue or any of that. I mean, he still could have functioned and been over with the crowd by sheer skill alone. It's sad, man. man. So fucking sad that everybody just got like a small taste of the quote-unquote sexual chocolate that is Mark Henry. D'Lo Brown, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about D'Lo Brown. The guy was an accountant who became a professional wrestler, or vice versa. And for the most part, D'Lo got it. I think he was a solid worker. I really loved his fucking frogs, especially when he was wearing like the chest. Those are always like really fucking athletic and entertaining to watch for me. But again, I think it was one of those cases where, okay, even if we do push D'Lo Brown, what do we do with him? You sit there and you overproduce him to the point where it's kind of like he doesn't know what to do with himself. He's always stuck in a certain gimmick. I think part of it is like the curse of being a black wrestler. It's like, hey, you're a black wrestler, we're going to put you in the Nation of Domination because you guys should be part of like this militant faction, dark-skinned wrestlers. And I say that because The Rock is not just black, he's also Samoan, and he was part of the Nation of Domination. So yeah, it's seemingly just another performer getting pigeonholed into one or more shitty gimmicks. I think if these guys had more opportunities to go elsewhere that paid well and kept them in the business without having to do other stuff, I think we would have gotten to see much more from them as performers, as pro wrestlers. I easily could have seen D'Lo Brown go and be something worthwhile in ECW. As a matter of fact, I would have fantasy booked him as their television champ. I think he makes for a great television wrestler. I think he's capable of doing 15-minute matches like they used to do back in the territories when they had TV champs. I think that would have been great for D'Lo Brown. That was one thing I always loved about D'Lo Brown's performance. He knew his limitations. He didn't try to do shit that he didn't know how to do. And a lot of people give him shit like, oh, D'Lo Brown's just a frog splash. Well, you know what? He did it really fucking well. And he was able to put on very solid matches and still be effective for his gimmick, as we see Mark Henry get hit by Owen in the knee with Slapnuts Jeff Jarrett's guitar. And now Jeff Jarrett's going to put the figure 4 on Mark Henry, and I believe this is the match. Yeah, Mark Henry taps. He is wearing a knee brace, so I don't know how much of this is actual, I don't know if he's working hurt legitimately or it's all a work. Either way, he's thriving in pain and they have lost the match. So to retain these titles, Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart as still your champs. The match runs about 9.5 minutes. And they're in the ring, and now you have Deborah basically being thrown to the mat and partially disrobed by Ivory. They're getting into a cat fight, as the Attitude Era so often gave us. So now both women have their shirt either off or open. I'm sure the King is going crazy right now. Jeff Jarrett puts his title belt over her, makes her carry it so that she's not showing any cleavage as they walk back to the dressing room. Now Owen puts his on, so now she can cover up very easily and not expose herself to the crowd. For the record, Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart I do not like as a tag team. It is partially because of Jeff Jarrett, but also, I don't know, for me, they just didn't gel well enough to give them any real grounds to be a tag team. We're gonna take a pause here with this episode, and we're gonna pay some bills and continue this watch along. So everybody pause at 53 minutes and 35 seconds and stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, ladies.
You know what really turns the Big Valboski on? Saving money. That's right. And you guys can help the boys over at the 20x20 crew do just that and visit Raise 20x20crew.com/podcast/raise. Buy yourself some discounted gift cards, save some money, and support the show, all in the same process. Damn, that's hot. 20x20crew.com/podcast/raise. Saving money definitely gets the Big Valboski to raise. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging in there with us as we do our first watch-along episode here at the 20 by 20 crew. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for visiting our sponsors. We're going to get continued here. And we paused it at 53 minutes and 35 seconds. So we're going to start that up back now. Again, we are watching WWF St. Valentine's Day Massacre 1999. And it is the 20-year anniversary of the event. Right now we are watching a video package from Sunday Night Heat that happened earlier in the night with Mankind getting the piss beat out of him by The Rock. Oh boy, this whole this whole debacle with Mankind, the character Mick Foley as a person, and The Rock, like that storied history is man, it's just so interesting. It's one of those. You have, I'll never forget, if you guys haven't watched the documentary Beyond the Mat, I suggest you do so. Really, really good documentary. And in there, you get to see the backstage aftermath of, I believe it is The Rock versus Mankind at King of the Ring. I don't remember what year, but that is the infamous match where The Rock ends up hitting Mankind with a chair, like, I want to say it's like 14 different chair shots during the match, and he ends up concussing him and basically peeling back a part of his fucking scalp. It was bad. It was so bad, and between one of Foley's books and the footage you get to see during that documentary and interviews and stuff over the years, you have a Mick Foley who, you know, he's willing to do anything and everything for this company and you know, to get his character over and the match over and things like that. And he put so much trust into The Rock and you know, every performer he got in the ring with. But at a point, you finally hear Mick Foley throughout the years kind of regret letting The Rock do that to him, especially since The Rock kind of I don't want to say nonchalant, but yeah, nonchalantly, like, hey, we went out there, we did it, man, and that was kind of it. There was no, seemingly anyway, there was no follow through, like, hey, are you okay, or anything like that. It was, I don't know if it was like a braggadocious young Rock who just like naively thought, hey, that was the way the match was supposed to go, and hey, we got it over, or he truly just didn't give two fucks about Mick Foley and how he almost fucking bashed his head in, to the point of, you know, brain damage. One of the many aspects, one of the many points of their relationship where it's just really interesting over the years. Definitely something to go back and look into and watch. We'll throw it on the website as part of Merch of the Week for this episode. You can order it through our Amazon partnership. Always please support the show if you can. 20x20crew.com/podcast/Amazon. You can do all your Amazon shopping through there. No added fees, no hidden fees, no extra cost to you. You simply do your shopping on Amazon through us, and Amazon shows us a little love and support. So we would definitely appreciate that if you can make that happen. Our next match of the evening is again, one of those feuds where, man, I don't know. The match is Val Venus along with Ryan Shamrock, lovely little lady here, going up against the current Intercontinental Champion in Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock, definitely an interesting guy to convert over from mixed martial arts to professional wrestling, to sports entertainment. I really liked him when he was like TNA NWA champion, because, you know, not only does he lend a lot of credibility, especially in the, you know, the same vein as a Dan Severn or, you know, people like that, but surprisingly, he made a really good transition over to wrestling in general, not just sports entertainment. And I thought the way he was used in WWF was pretty good. I think it could have been better, but it was pretty good. He made a solid Intercontinental champ, and we get to see him here defend the title against Val Venus. Again, Sean Morley, a.k.a. Val Venus, another one of those guys, young and up-and-comer, and I love the gimmick. I think it works well, but I think he's capable of so much fucking more. Oh, my God. It pains me. But he really did well with the Val Venus gimmick. It's hard. You're hard-pressed to find someone else who can get that gimmick over like he did. Especially in this time, during the Attitude Era. We have Billy Gunn as the special guest referee. Leading up to the match, it goes like this. So, Ken Shamrock's sister came to support him at ringside, and she ends up gaining the attention of Billy Gunn, who ended up mooning her. So, Val Venus ends up performing his little dance for her, you know. And despite, Shamrock's brotherly overbearing attempts to keep his sister from getting in with the likes of Val Venus, or Billy Gunn for that matter, she ends up being in Val Venus's adult film, in quotation marks, Saving Ryan's Privates. And Shamrock promises, hey, I'm not going to put my hands on Val Venus. It didn't stop him from attacking Val Venus repeatedly with steel chairs. So, like, literally, I won't put my hands on him, but I'll put chairs on him. And even though the IC title is on the line for this match, he still couldn't contain his rage, and he just keeps attacking Val Venus again and again during in-ring interviews and such. When the referees and officials tried to break both those guys up, Shamrock attacks all of them, leading to Earl Hebner, who was the senior referee at this point, refusing to ref the match. So, because he's, obviously he's scared now. He's fearing for his own safety and that of his team of referees. So later in that same segment, DX's Billy Gunn comes out and takes off his top to reveal a referee t-shirt, and he volunteers to call the match. During this match, I have a few notes. One, good old Michael Cole, even back in 1999, still is fucking shit up left and right. And during the match, if you listen really close, he calls Ken Shamrock Ken Shamlock. and you know what? I know I'm going to sound like I'm picking on Michael Cole, but I am. I'm picking on Michael Cole. Because here's a guy, he gets trained by Jim Ross, okay? And all that training, the many hours of performing and practice and such, take your time. Take your time and get shit right. Call it like it's supposed to be. Get their names right. At least get their names right. He still does that shit to this day, where he can't like he calls wrestlers the wrong thing, the wrong name, and it just comes across like he just doesn't give a shit. You know, when JR was calling New Japan and he was a little sauced on the mic, and he's calling some of the Japanese wrestlers by different names or couldn't pronounce them. He wasn't really trying. And whatever's going on with you, if you're a color commentator for wrestling or sports, get your shit together. Like, that's your job. You have one job. Do it. That's my gripe. Getting back to the match, Billy Gunn clearly is toying with Ken Shamrock here, and Kip's a solid performer, and I think for the most part he does a decent job at what he does, but he's one of those guys where I think he does need a lot of production. I don't think he can be overproduced. He works well in the ring, but in the way of storylines and such, I think he needs a lot of direction. At least that's the vibe I get. You have, if I'm not mistaken, they end up building a feud after this match. They build a feud between him and Ken Shamrock because of the way the match ends, which is fine. Like, I never minded seeing that, but you have a performer like Billy Gunn, and he works well in tag team stuff, but whenever he got singles pushes, I don't know if it was just like him choking or what have you, but his singles runs I was never a fan of, and something gets lost in translation. And it sucks because, he can work. He can definitely work, and you would think, two guys who can actually work, and then you have Shamrock who actually, takes part in MMA. It should be a no-brainer. Like, hey, this should work. It should be a pretty good match. And yeah, no thanks, man. I'll pass. I'll pass on that every day of the week. For me, this match takes way too long. I know we only have 8 pay-per-view matches on this card, and we're already on the 5th one. But this one clocks in at almost 16 minutes, and if the intention was for the belt to go to Val Venus and then also start a feud between Ken Shamrock and Billy Gunn, I think both of those things could be accomplished in a much smaller amount of time. And, keep in mind, this is a mid-card match, whether you're okay with that or not. I think for a mid-card match, I think it goes too long. I think they could have ended it and still got across the point that Billy Gunn was going to screw over Ken Shamrock. So they easily could have done this, I'd say, probably in about 10 minutes as opposed to 16. A lot of people give someone like Dan the Beast Severn, flack for not having any personality in the ring, going in there and just being about business and that's it. But he's a mixed martial artist. He's a legitimate mixed martial artist. Not that Ken Shamrock wasn't, but it's like that's all he knows. So when Dan Severn was NWA World Heavyweight Champion, that is the persona you wanted for that title. That it lends to the prestige of that title. Dan Severn is a professional wrestler, whereas Ken Shamrock at this point in time is a sports entertainer. And Ken Shamrock gets it. He knows how to be a sports entertainer, and he does a really good job at it. I think Dan the Beast Severn wasn't totally incapable of, transforming himself into a sports entertainer, but for my money, I like to see Dan Severn as a pro wrestler. I think that's why he didn't work very well in the WWF. They took his mixed martial arts credibility, and they're like, hey, we're going to make this guy a badass. And he was a legitimate badass, but I think he was too much of a badass, and he didn't want to budge. He'll tell you that himself. He's a wrestler, and he wrestles. He doesn't sports entertain. So it would have been interesting if they were able to successfully convert him over, especially under the tutelage of someone like Ken Shamrock. I think they would have been a hell of a fucking tag team. Think about that for a second. Two legitimate MMA guys, which I don't think, to this day, I don't think has been done in any pro wrestling or sports entertainment. Have a tag team that was based originally from mixed martial arts. Hopefully we get to see something like that with the all of the mixed martial artists on the women's side that are coming up through NXT and whatnot. That would be really fucking cool to watch and play out. Hopefully they do it well. Hopefully they give them enough space and time to get in there and build this, cohesive mixed martial arts style tag team. I think that would, if done properly, man, what a spectacle to be entertained by. Especially on a stage bigger and of the size of the WWE. If I read correctly, Val Venus these days is not in the professional wrestling business. He is in the medical marijuana business. I think he owns stock in an actual dispensary somewhere in California, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of always interesting as we see Billy Gunn here stop the 3 count, toying with Shamrock. It's really interesting to see these guys, once they leave the business, what they do for a living. Obviously you get a lot of guys, especially the older guys, where it's all I'm doing is wrestling and that's it, and I'll keep doing, public appearances and shit like that, and that's it. But you get guys like Morley, Val Venus, who was like, screw this, I'm looking out above and beyond sports entertainment to see what else I can do, and seems like he's in something that he loves to do and is financially stable for him. So good for him. Again, another slow count by Billy Gunn. And so that's like the 3rd or 4th at this point. And I think what they should have did with this match was have Ken Shamrock, every time he pinned Val Venus, obviously do slow counts from Billy Gunn on purpose, and then make sure that the last official pin by Shamrock was not only slow, but that's the one Billy Gunn should have counted. Should have been able to count to 3, but then purposely stops him and definitively fucks over Ken Shamrock in this match. And then they could have ended the match right after that. Val Venus could have rolled him up for a quick pin or something of that nature. I think that would have worked much better than the way this match actually ends. It also speaks volumes on the part of Val Venus, where he clearly had an opportunity to pin Ken Shamrock, and he ends up standing over him and doing his little like gyrating of the hips dance, wasting time when he could have easily taken the time to pin him, and again ended this match with a better time. Now we're seeing Ryan Shamrock help Val Venus get to the ropes after Ken Shamrock put on his ankle lock. It made me think of the bar brawl match he had with Tom Lawler Super Bowl weekend. I'm pretty sure it was available on Fight TV. I don't remember the promotion who put it on, but you can find more information about Fight TV and actually get credit from us for like towards your first purchase. I think it's $15. 20x20crew.com/podcast/fight. That's FITE. The promotion had set up a match between Ken Shamrock and Filthy Tom Lawler for a barroom brawl match. So, no ring, no ropes, no nothing like that. They just literally battled throughout the bar. And I was reading an article where Tom Lawler was talking about the breaking of kayfabe there during the match, where they had agreed upon what they wanted to do for the match, but at one point there was some sort of like stand or some sort of prop that Shamrock was supposed to powerbomb Lawler through, and he completely missed it, and Tom Lawler ends up getting powerbombed onto the concrete floor, narrowly avoiding a concussion and possibly breaking his neck. And then he ends up putting the ankle lock on him during the match, and Lawler was talking about just how snug or stiff Ken Shamrock's ankle lock was, and he's telling everybody like, hey, Shamrock's up there in age, but this man is no joke. He's like it felt like he was about to break my fucking ankle. So Shamrock looked good too, man. He's still pretty cut, still in shape. I mean, you can tell he's got salt and pepper hair now, and he's there's definitely age on his face, but I have no doubt in my mind that man can still go. Here we're watching the replay of the end of the match. Ryan Shamrock smacks her brother. Billy Gunn gets involved after the match. He beats up Val Venus after Venus poses with the belt. Obviously kind of like putting his name into the hat for the Intercontinental title. So Val Venus and Ryan Shamrock leave victorious as they're walking to the backstage area. We see a pan of the crowd, and now we're cutting over to another video vignette of Mankind with Mr. Sacco. And this is, of course, going to take us to our next match. Actually, this is just a shirt advertisement, but it ends up taking us over to our next match, which is going to be the Corporation in the form of China and Kane. And they're going to be taking on DX in the form of Triple H and X-Pac in a tag match. So that's what's on board next. Again, we are doing our first ever watch-along episode. Matt's on vacation this week. I am here at Casa de Mang, as opposed to the 20x20 studios. And yeah, we're doing a watch along, and follow along with us. You're gonna need a network subscription, so you can do that, get that possibly at a discount. 20x20crew.com/podcast/WWE network. Again, that's all one word, no hyphens, no spaces. So we're seeing video package kind of showing you what happened over the weeks. For those that don't remember, it was the night after the Royal Rumble. Triple H demands an I Quit match against The Rock, questioning his the dubious circumstances that the one had ended the previous night. And so during the match, Triple H was just about to put Rock through an announce table when the corporation appears, and they ended up basically, Kane threatened to chokeslam China, who was, like the DX bodyguard, I suppose, if Triple H didn't quit the match. So when he did quit the match, the corporation left, but China revealed that she had switched sides by low-blowing Triple H. So she turns against DX. And the following week, Triple H has a steel cage match with Kane, which he won thanks to some help from X-Pac, after China also interfered. And after the match, she threatened her former partner in Triple H, telling him that she had a special St. Valentine's Day gift for him. So that leads us up to this match, and that's what you're seeing in the video package here, as we see low blow after low blow, and her in the cage. Again, the corporation, one of those factions where it's just like, hey, we've got a bunch of people we need places for, and this is what we're going to do. For as many people sit there and complain about people turning heel or people turning babyface, those two roles in some shape or form will always be a part of professional wrestling and or sports entertainment. I know these things have been done millions of times at this point, but given a compelling story, both of those character archetypes still work. We have DX coming out first. Again, it is X-Pac and Triple H. X-Pac is wearing gold around his waist. I want to say that is the European title. I think it's the European title. So they come out first, and they're doing the whole DX crotch chops set to pyro. And they do the whole announcement, let's get ready to suck it and such, as you see the big suck it signs in the audience. Triple H at this point, for me, man, he had a lot of potential. I really enjoyed, over the years, the feud he had with The Rock. To me, there's no bones about it. Both of those guys, they gave each other hell, and they performed well against one another. And from the sounds of it, listening to shoot interviews, reading articles and such, at least at one point, there was legitimate beef between those two, and I think a majority of that beef was two guys just being competitive in nature and wanting to be the best in the business. But that's what brought out such a great feud between the two, and that's what elevated both of their performances. Was there real heat at times between these two? Yes, of course, but I think they channeled it and used the energy very wisely and put it into their performance, as opposed to something non-synergistic, like telling each other to fuck off and like fucking each other over in matches and such. So one of those times where something actually works like better than it should have. And us fans got the best part of it, man. There's awesome performances by those guys. And speaking of awesome performances, I have a giant salt truck outside of the studio here, deciding to interrupt. So we're gonna, bear with me, folks. This is we're live, pal. Kane comes out. Kane and China coming out as part of the corporation. Kane, another one of those guys. I love the gimmick. I love what he has done over the years. I think the gimmick is long since played out, and obviously he's the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee now. And he doesn't perform unless it's like a special occasion or something of that nature. But I think that gimmick was just. I think it went way longer than it had to have gone. And I'm not saying like, hey, bring back Isaac Yankum or anything like that, but maybe just maybe retire, maybe utilize him backstage as a road agent or something of that nature, because Kane in the later years was not like, he just didn't mean shit, he just didn't. Here we see China coming out, obviously, who is no longer with us, and Joni was one of those. It was like right place, right time. At least to me, she, clearly she had an impact on sports entertainment, and she was making such strides in the realm of intergender competition, and I don't think she had a proper opportunity, a proper push to like truly showcase what she was capable of. But I think she's a pioneer nonetheless. And I'm sure people out there will sit there and disagree with me, but you don't often get opportunities like that for someone to come along and trailblaze a new avenue, a new path for a certain kind of competition or a certain type of performer. And when you have that, when you have that opportunity, that unique opportunity, you take it and you should strap a gang of rocket fuel to it. I think she could have made way much more of an impact in this company and in other companies later on down the line, had she been able to keep her life together better. For those of you who have not been to a live event or have not been to a live event in some time, the size of Kane, keep in mind, I'm 6'8", about 240 pounds. People regard me as a big guy. I certainly I'm not small, but I definitely have a stature about me, and I know I'm bigger than most people, but he makes me look like a shrimp. He makes me look so small. Same thing with Big Show, like just massive human being. Intimidating nonetheless. I mean, not only is he tall, but he's, especially at this point, Kane is jacked. He's a heavy dude. He's got to be pushing 300 pounds. He's built like a brick shithouse. Here's China. China wants to tag in. He finally gives it to her. And again, Joni's no slouch. She has an interesting working punch where when she hits you, she kind of fades back a little bit. And I'm not like, I don't have a gripe with it in a negative manner. It's really interesting because you don't get to see that. Everybody's working punch is different. Excuse me. Everybody's working punch is different. one of the most regarded working punches in the business, still to this day by a lot of people, is Scott Hall's. If you take a look at Scott Hall's, there's a lot of forward momentum in his punch, and he's also, when he connects with your face, he's also spinning his body almost like a roundhouse, and depending on how he does it, he's either putting forward and turning motion towards you as he punches you to really lay into the punch, or he sizes you up and then does a complete spin and lands the punch on you. So one way or another, you're getting clocked pretty decently during the match when he actually puts fist to face. For future reference, Triple H using the ropes, like going up top, is I'm not a fan of. I never, he's a pretty good technical wrestler, and again, I think he's just prone to working his gimmick, so you only get to see a certain amount of his technical ability, but dude, lay off the ropes. You don't need to go climb to the top. You don't second or middle rope at best, and even then, keep it in the ring. Don't try to be any kind of high flying. And I bring this up too because now Kane is on the top rope, ready to come flying down with like this lariat from hell, and it is impressive. Don't get me wrong. It is impressive anytime a man of his stature can climb to the top rope of a wrestling ring and fly off like he's fucking Rey Mysterio. But just because it could be done means it shouldn't be done. Here we see Joni doing a good job of blocking a standing suplex, which H does get up, but then she weasels her way out of it, and she slams him. I definitely got to go back and look up some information to see what she was benching while she was working for the WWF at this time, because I know it had to be up there. I want to say around the 250 range, if I'm not mistaken. It was like 250. Because keep in mind, this was like, this was early. It was like 2 years into her career there. Or her career in wrestling, anyway. And here you see X-Pac and H double teaming Kane, trying to get him over for a suplex, in which they battle back and forth, and they finally get him over. X-Pac, again, one of those, for whatever reason, he was one of those performers where you actually got to see him wrestle just about as good as he wrestled anywhere during his given career. You don't get to see a lot of guys be able to do that, go from, the pure unadulterated wrestling that is independent wrestling, and translate it over successfully into the WWF. Again, a lot of these guys are watered down and such, but Sean Waltman, aka X-Pac, he's one of those guys that you get to see something very similar to how he would perform in an indie setting. Which it still surprises me to this day. Anytime a WWF or WWE performer gets to perform on a level that is not so watered down, you should be aware that you're watching something special, because this is not an everyday occurrence. This isn't something that actually goes on. He does it. He does it seamlessly. I mean, and I'm not saying he's done it the entirety of his stint with the company, but when he was the Lightning Kid and the 1-2-3 Kid, he still did moves that weren't necessarily okay with with WWF management or WWE management. And I think some of that at least was due in part to him being part of the clique and them kind of getting their way backstage with Vince at times. No matter how much truth or falsehood there is to that, I do believe they had some sort of pull with their matches. And again, this isn't me like riding their dicks and being a fanboy about the clique and all that. But they do come out and say like, hey, we more or less tried to book our own matches because, we wanted the locker room to be at its best. And I know a lot of people think that's horse shit and that they just were money hungry and whatnot. And hey, you know what? There's some truth to that. They do, they wanted money, and everybody should want money in something they love to do. Why not? But I think for whatever reason, whatever gripe you have, I think they were still able to do stuff during matches that didn't necessarily sit well with the booking committee in the WWF, and it definitely helped. It definitely helped the matches, in my opinion. And I feel we see that here with X-Pac. And to me, he is one of I think he's probably the most underrated or at least overlooked member of said clique, where he leaves the WWF and he gets signed to WCW as part of the NWO as the 6th member. And that move right there, that was like, it was perceived, I know I've said it before on other podcasts or other episodes, it was perceived as like this big momentum changer in the Monday Night Wars. And I think it was so relevant and like such a power move in the way of talent, because it was Hall and Nash's real life friend. This wasn't Hulk Hogan being paired with them. This wasn't Sting or Macho or any of those guys. He was a real life friend who had taken, time and been with them for years and have developed a true friendship, on and off television. And when he came over to be with them, it was like the icing on the cake for them. Like, great, we finally have the kid with us, and we can like really start to run roughshod over people. And it showed. Like, they had a new confidence about them once he showed up, and you got to see him perform like a true cruiserweight, much more so than he did in the WWF. And I think a lot of people overlooked that. I think it was a very important trait of talent that definitely swung the pendulum further towards the side of WCW success. I don't think a lot of people see that when we talk about X-Pac, a.k.a. Sean Waltman, a.k.a. Six. Still love that shirt. I love the Six shirt. The one shirt I wish I had owned. I never got the chance to own during the NWO days. Here you have the match is continuing. It's got Triple H and Kane brawling on the outside, almost towards like they're going towards the backstage area. And then you have X-Pac landing the Bronco Buster onto China. Always a bit of a controversial move. Here comes Shane McMahon to interfere in the match. What can we say about Shane McMahon? Good Lord. X-Pac chases Shane McMahon to the back. I don't like what Shane McMahon has become in the way of a performer for the company. I just don't. I think he had a place and a time, and his relevancy is long gone. I think he should just give it up. I really do. And now I think, if I'm not mistaken, as this is being recorded and aired, he is tag team champions with The Miz right now. So, yeah. I think that speaks volumes about WWE's booking at the moment. Kane with the choke slam to help out his partner Chyna. He's going to pick her up and drag her and throw her on top of Triple H. And I think he's going to... Oh, no. Okay, so he's just waiting on the apron as referee Tim White runs back to count the pin. And now we have Chyna and Kane, a.k.a. the Corporation, victorious over DX in the form of Triple H and X-Pac. The match goes about 15 minutes. Again, more room and more lost potential here for a better storyline. You have Kane and Chyna operating remarkably as a pretty well-gelled tag team. Something that I never expected with this match. And it's a shame. It's a shame that we didn't get to see more of this. Especially with Chyna, becoming this intergender pioneer of sorts. I think they could have easily, had her tag with Kane and become a legit tag team and win gold. I think that was a missed opportunity by them. My thoughts on Triple H and X-Pac as a tag team. Obviously they have chemistry. Obviously they're friends. In the way of a tag team, as far as DX goes, they're so-so. They're not my favorite. Obviously, when we talk tag teams and DX, everyone thinks the New Age Outlaws, and you're right to think that. I mean, those guys, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, had such great chemistry as a tag team, both on the mic and in the ring. So, if you're asking me who I would love to see when it comes to DX tag teams, it is definitely the New Age Outlaws. So now they cut to the backstage area. You see two open ambulances and a gurney awaiting this next match as Michael Cole and Jerry the King Lawler do their color commentary, or the best chance at color commentary. Because our next match is the last man standing match between Mankind and The Rock. And Mankind is coming into this match as the world champion. Again, another storied part about this whole Rock and Mankind or Mick Foley relationship over the years. It's been tumultuous at times, and it's out there in the ether of wrestling rumors and stories where people like The Rock didn't have faith in Mick Foley as the heavyweight champ. A lot of people feel that he just didn't translate over as a good champion. Vince McMahon being one of them. And it sucks because, that gets out there to the public. And then to make matters worse, the night he won the championship for the first time, it was a pre-taped Raw. And obviously, WCW spoiled it on a Nitro, which was really underhanded. And hearing Eric Bischoff talk about that these days, he does regret doing that. But at the time, it was such a scumbag move for them to spoil it for everybody. They essentially had Tony Schiavone get on the mic and say, hey, don't turn the channel if you want to go watch WWF, our competitor. Don't turn the channel. We're just going to tell you what happens. And they're making Mankind their world champion. And he said it with such disdain, like, oh my God, I couldn't believe they're doing that. Again, a lot of people thought he was unworthy. And man, you want to talk about like stupid bullshit when it comes to wrestling. Quite honestly, whether you agree with me or not, I am of the opinion that he makes a hell of a champ. I just think he wasn't pushed necessarily the right way. This video package that they're showing right now is a really good sum up, like a nutsh, like everything you need to know about their storied history in a nutshell. Really great video package, including that fucking empty arena match. Good Lord. But yeah, getting back to the idea of Mankind being world champ, Mick Foley as a world champ, that statement alone, so much fucking potential, especially in the WWF, because they had access to every one of his gimmicks. This wasn't like, oh, he's only under contract as Mankind, or he's only under contract to do Love or Cactus Jack. No, they had every facet of creativity associated with Mick Foley. And to me, they completely dropped the fucking ball on this one. For my money, if I'm fantasy booking Mick Foley as world champion, so let's say he already has the title. You prolong his title reign by essentially utilizing his different gimmicks. And what I mean by that is you take Mick Foley as Mankind and he's champ. So you build him up, you have match after match, throw whoever, any name you want up against him. But depending on their situation and the way the story's written, you have him go up against other instances of Mick Foley. Like, I'll give you an example. So, The Rock. The Rock wants the belt back. He wants it back so bad. He's got a title shot scheduled against Mankind, right? Well, you put it out there on Monday Night Raw. You have Dude Love. No, I take that back. You have Mankind come out and explain, like, you're not worthy of another title shot. You're gonna get it, but you're not worthy. And if you really, really want it, you're going to have to go through other guys. So tonight on Raw, you're going to have to go against Dude Love. And then you have him, pull up a video of Dude Love commentating on how he's going to come out and beat The Rock's ass. It's as simple as that. And then, again, you swerve The Rock. Rock loses the match to Dude Love, and then he comes back at it again. And this time is like, fuck this shit, I want my title match. And then you have the same thing happen again, where you have Mankind come out and like, oh, you couldn't get past Dude Love, what makes you think you deserve a title shot against me? But I'll tell you what, you really want one? You go through Cactus Jack, and then you have him versus Cactus Jack. And I understand it's the same performer, it's all Mick Foley. But those different personas, he worked so well with each and every one of them that you are really looking at different people, whether you realize that or not. You're looking at different people fight The Rock or fight whoever you want to put up against him. And it makes for such interesting and entertaining television. sports entertainment. And that's what I would have done with Mankind's title run. And let the critics say what they want to say. I think it would have been a fucking smash hit. And it definitely would have been fucking interesting. Especially if you have someone as hungry as The Rock and as hot as The Rock. Let's face it, The Rock is fucking just as hot, if not hotter, than Stone Cold Steve Austin was at this time. You had that kind of level of talent there in the WWE at this time. You had a lot of guys. You had a star-studded, superstar-studded, say that 3 times fast, locker room at this point in time with the company. Like, it was chock full of awesome fucking talent. The things they could have done, man. It's just one of those things I will forever be pissed off at this company about. Just all the wasted opportunity. Here you have The Rock coming out first. Mankind is now coming out with the belt. He is at ringside. And to give you guys a check-in, I am at 1 hour, 51 minutes, and 53 seconds. And here we are for this last man standing match. So basically, if you guys don't know or don't remember, a last man standing match means your opponent has to be subdued for a 10 count. If they do not answer the 10 count and they cannot get back up on their feet, the match ends. This particular match, spoiler alert, will end in a draw. It ends at 22 minutes, so we're just getting started here with this match. Leading up to this match, officially leading up to this match, so The Rock becomes WWF champion at Survivor Series. And, of course, it was under the most dubious of circumstances, which they aimed at recreating the Montreal Screwjob, again, which took place with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. This means that the opponent, Mankind, lost the match by submission without actually submitting, in a nutshell. The following month, being December, at In Your House Rock Bottom, the Mankind won a championship match by causing The Rock to pass out from the mandible claw. Everybody knows and loves the mandible claw, especially when it involved Mr. Sacco. But The Rock technically did not tap out. So due to the ambiguity of the circumstances, Mankind eventually gains a championship match on the January 4th edition of Raw, which he won, and then he ended up losing again at the Royal Rumble in an I Quit match, thanks to a recording of his voice being played. Now that is if I'm not mistaken, that is the match I referred to earlier in this podcast, where Mick Foley gets a really bad concussion and his head busted open really bad, where it peeled back part of his scalp, courtesy of The Rock, and all those chair shots. Again, I think it was 14 chair shots. You can see the aftermath in the Beyond the Mat documentary, which you can purchase through our website, over at 20x20crew.com/podcast/Amazon, and do all your Amazon shopping. Go get yourself either a physical copy or a digital copy of Beyond the Mat, and help support the show. Here they are wrestling near the entrance, where you have all the entrance prop, the entranceway props, like the scaffolding and such. That's where they're battling at right now, as Rock gets Irish whipped into some of that steel structure. But going back to the Royal Rumble, Mankind loses after his voice was pre-taped saying him I quit. Then they have the empty arena match during halftime heat, which was during the halftime of Super Bowl 33. He trapped The Rock underneath a forklift, and that's how he won the match. And then going into WrestleMania, there was a definite decision that needed to be made over who the champion would be, and thus a match with no seeming ambiguity over its end was booked. This being a last man standing match where the winner is, again, the wrestler left standing after the count of 10. So there's really no other rule than that. That's why they're all over the damn place. And right now, they're on one of the tech tables towards the back. And this is some scary shit, as you have both of those guys on the table. Luckily, it didn't break, because those two beefy guys up there, it didn't break until The Rock was DDT'd into the table. These guys, like, damn, they take it to each other, and I'm really surprised at Mick Foley for agreeing to just working with The Rock in general after all the shit he had put him through during that Royal Rumble match. If that were me, and you got a guy who decides that giving me 14 chair shots to the head while I'm handcuffed was a good idea and necessary for the match, shit, I would be I'd be rethinking my career and my choice of partners here to wrestle up against. But I'm also not Mick Foley, so. Folks, thank you again for enjoying the podcast and listening. We're actually going to take another break and try to pay some more bills. We're going to let you enjoy the rest of this match in its entirety, and we will get back to you after the match. So please enjoy the match, enjoy the rest of the match, and stay tuned.
If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
Finally, The Rock has come back to support the 20x20 crew. That's right, jabronis. Make your way on down to 20x20crew.com/podcast/Amazon. Know your role and shop with the boys through Amazon. They get money back. They get some love from Amazon. You get to buy whatever you jabronis want to buy over at Amazon.com, and it works out both ways. 20x20crew.com/podcast/Amazon. Know your role, shut your mouth, and go do some shopping. Welcome back, ladies and gents. Thank you again for listening to the podcast and supporting the podcast. And we are in the midst of our first ever watch-along episode. We are watching WWF's In Your House, number 27, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, 1999, emanating from the Pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee. We have let you enjoy the Last Man Standing match in its entirety, so we are skipping ahead here. If you will, please join us at the 2-hour, 22-minute, and 45-second mark. I'm gonna hit the play button right now. You should see the ring crew setting up the old school steel cage, which is matted black now instead of blue. They're setting it up for the steel cage match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. Vince McMahon. While they set up the cage, going back to that Last Man Standing match, I had kind of fantasy booked Mick Foley and his multiple personas. You know what better way to have that Last Man Standing match than to feature all three of his personas in that Last Man Standing match. He could have easily came out and started off as Dude Love and was like, screw this, you don't get a shot at the title tonight until you beat me. And then you have The Rock go ahead and beat Dude Love, and then The Rock's, let The Rock do what he does and get on the mic and like bring that jabroni out here. I beat him, now I want the match, I want my title shot. And then instead of Mankind coming out, you have Cactus Jack come out, and he has to battle through Cactus Jack. Now I understand this is a lot of work for Mick Foley with the 3 costume changes, but damn, what a crazy ass match that would have been. And then for it to go to a draw, which this one did, dude, I think it would have added like that much more meat and depth to the match and put it over even more. I think we'd still be talking about it much more so than what actually occurred. So here we have Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out, trademark black and silver vest, climbing the ropes, giving everybody his arm raised in the corner pose. I really enjoyed the Last Man Standing match. I just think booking it that way would have been a hell of a lot more interesting. Really quick too, there's one thing that I always point out during Mick Foley matches, and I will do so now here, is his breathing. If you listen to his breathing, he makes weird noises like "acha" and things like that. It's done on purpose. It's kind of a breathing technique that is used to combat pain. I don't know what the technique is called, but it is a legitimate like breathing technique to combat pain. I'm sure there's information out there on the internet somewhere. If I find some that is worthwhile to you guys, I'll post it as part of the episode's webpage. But yeah, so you will hear him. I think Terry Funk does it at points in time in his career. I know Chris Jericho did it from time to time. You get these guys who you use that to help combat pain during the match. As we see Vince McMahon come out looking jacked to shit. Anybody who tells me this motherfucker doesn't do steroids is smoking rock. And I don't mean Dwayne Johnson. This is fucking ridiculous how massive Vince McMahon is at this point in time in his career. Not just as a CEO, but as a performer. Like, this is ridiculous. He's clearly juicing. So Vince is climbing the cage now, and he's kind of touting Steve Austin, and Austin's like, "Come on, get your ass in the ring. I can't wait to beat your ass." But to give you some background on this match, and this is our main event, and so here's what happened. So Stone Cold defeats Mr. McMahon in a steel cage for number 1 contendership at WrestleMania 15. Okay? And when Vince McMahon wins the Royal Rumble, which, wow. And people have a issue with fucking Kevin Nash booking himself to get over like that. Anyway, I digress. So McMahon wins the Royal Rumble, and that earns him a match against the champion at WrestleMania. But at the time, it seemed as if the champion was going to be The Rock. Okay, and so being that Mr. McMahon is not a full-time wrestler, it was announced on the January 25th edition of Raw that he was vacating his place at WrestleMania, only to be informed by the commissioner, Shawn Michaels, that if the winner is incapable of wrestling in the WrestleMania main event, then the runner-up takes their place. Being as the runner-up was Stone Cold Steve Austin, this enraged Vince McMahon, and Austin used this to, bait McMahon into a match. explaining that even more than a WWF Championship match, he wanted another chance to fight Vince McMahon without any legal ramifications, so much that he would risk his WrestleMania place for a chance at the match. And to make sure that it was just one-on-one and it would take place to make sure that it was just one-on-one, it was going to take place inside of a steel cage. So the night before, on that special Saturday Night Raw, which actually filmed the preceding Monday, McMahon made Austin run the gauntlet against all the corporation members, ending with McMahon pinning a weakened Steve Austin. And that's how we get to this cage match. And so far, Vince McMahon is doing a bang-up job of keeping Stone Cold out of the damn ring now. There's a lot to be said about the character of Vince McMahon, or Mr. McMahon. Well, we'll say Mr. McMahon. Because, again, this is one of those fantasies. You have a fantasy of letting your boss have it, telling your boss to shove it, this job sucks, shove it up your ass, all those great things about telling a boss off. This is what resonates with everybody who loves this angle and this storyline. And who better to do it than the bionic redneck Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's not necessarily bionic at this point because he's only wearing one knee brace. So I think he was officially the bionic redneck after the placement of the second knee brace. Regardless, he is now trouncing Mr. McMahon all over the announce table, and now they're about to go into the crowd. There goes Mr. McMahon over the border into the front row, and Stone Cold follows suit. These guys, I think this works so much because of trust. There's a lot of trust that was put in by both of these guys. They knew it worked. They knew it worked and why it worked. And I think McMahon was open to it because it was Steve Austin. I don't think he would have necessarily gave this opportunity, at least to this extent, to anyone else. And that includes The Rock, that includes Triple H, that includes Mick Foley. I think they realized they had something special and that there was a certain chemistry with the both of them. And believe me, there's a lot of trust going on here. Vince just doesn't allow anyone to manhandle his ass. So, and kudos to Steve Austin for selling for fucking Vince McMahon. I mean, shit. That's another thing about sports entertainment and pro wrestling these days. The art of selling is just so lost. It's such a an important commodity to professional wrestling, and it doesn't get executed in a very effective manner these days, and it's a shame. It really is a shame. I bring it up too because Stone Cold, on one of his episodes, he was talking to Jake the Snake Roberts, and I know everybody these days has beef with Jake Roberts over the whole Jerry Gray situation, which I'll get into that here in a minute. But Jake the Snake Roberts, awesome fucking seller. I mean, you can be mad at him about his personal dealings and what kind of an asshole he is in life. That's fine. It didn't take away from him selling. He knew how to fucking sell. Stone Cold knew how to sell, and they knew how to get people over. And that's what he's doing for Vince McMahon here. Shit. I mean, don't get me wrong, Vince is doing his job too, but Stone Cold is definitely the better seller. I think selling, the art of selling, is a point of contention with a lot of fans these days, both old and new, because a lot of the old school wrestling fans notice that it just doesn't get done or done appropriately. And doing very small things in a match in the way of selling can be so fucking effective at gaining your audience's attention. And it isn't like you have to necessarily do these gigantic, formidable tasks. I mean, just the smallest little thing, like taking a powder. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, if two guys are wrestling in the ring and one clearly gets the best of the other, so one of them rolls out of the ring like, fuck this shit, I'm just going to walk away for a little while, that's called taking a powder. The amount of anger that gets riled up in wrestling fans when someone takes a powder is something truly special to watch. I remember being at a Ring of Honor show in Chicago, and my daughter was with us, and it was like a 10-man tag. It was the Bullet Club versus Los Ingobernables de Japón. And if I'm not mistaken, Cody Rhodes was in the ring, and he was starting to clear house of the guys, and I believe Tetsuya Naito, rolled out of the ring and was like, fuck this shit. I'm not going to take his bullshit. And he just kind of waited a little bit. And it got such a reaction from the crowd. And, Ingobernables fans were like, yeah, and then Bullet Club fans were booing. And my daughter, being a Bullet Club fan, absolutely incensed by the entire thing. Completely angered, like, get back in the ring, It was great. It was great to see that little bit of an effort in that particular way still gets such a rise out of the audience, one way or another. Getting back to Jake the Snake and Jerry Gray, if you guys don't listen to Brian Last's 605 Super Podcast and you're a fan of old school wrestling, I implore you, please go listen to that podcast. It is probably the best wrestling podcast in existence today. And I know those are really strong words, but Mr. Last does such a real good job of storytelling about old school wrestling, and approaches it from the standpoint of almost like a historian. And it just, he makes it so fucking interesting, and he works really fucking hard at it. I am a huge fan of the show. Kudos to the 605 Super Podcast. But Jerry Gray, a former wrestler and a former wrestling promoter, at some point in the podcast, I don't remember what episode it was, but Jerry Gray was a guest, and he ended up talking about like road stories of working with Jake the Snake Roberts, and he has many of them, and a lot of them are really fucking amusing. And he had brought up the notion that Jake the Snake still owes him money, somewhere around the amount of like $10,000. After all, Jake did go through some drug-related problems in his life and things of that nature, and Jerry Gray was one of those guys that was trying to help him out, take advantage of Mr. Gray. And now Jerry Gray is dealing with the monster that is cancer, and he can use any help that that people can give to him. We will post that link on this episode's page for you to donate to Jerry Gray if you can. But there has been a huge backlash against Jake the Snake for not helping Jerry Gray out in his time of need now that Jake got his shit together. And I don't want to be the guy that sits there and says I don't believe either one of them, because clearly, I don't think Jerry Gray is lying about going through cancer. And, God forbid that he is. I mean, that would make him a very fucking terrible human being. And I hope no one ever does that. But it's a lot more plausible knowing the asshole that Jake the Snake is and could be, that is probably the more likely of the two stories, that Jerry Gray is right and that Jake the Snake does still owe him money because, Jake was down and out more than a handful of times in his life, and, he has not made amends to a lot of people. So, I digress. Getting back to the match here, we see Mr. McMahon, who was about to be rolled out of the arena on a stretcher. He's got the full neck brace on and the whole nine, and Steve Austin got on the mic and was basically like, screw this shit, the match is not ending this way. I promised you guys blood, and I'm going to give it to you. So he runs and dumps McMahon off of the gurney, and now he is at ringside, and he's beating him with one of the fiberglass boards they use to, like a transport board, like a gurney board. And he's dragging him back into the steel cage. This is by far one of my favorite steel cages, the old school. This one, it used to be blue, now they painted it black, but it's the same cage. That is the steel cage, one of the steel cages that I grew up with as a wrestling fan. Watching it on Saturday night's main event, especially the match between Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Hulk Hogan for the heavyweight title, where they both dropped down at the same time. And oh man, what a hell of a night that was. Staying up late Saturday night and watching that match and just being shocked, like, holy cow, did Hogan just lose this match? Did they tie? Like, what the hell's going on? Such a cliffhanger. It was such fucking great television. I definitely miss television like that in the way of sports entertainment. It's not quite the same these days. Clearly not a conventional steel cage by any means, especially growing up and being saturated with NWA and other territories, WCCW, world-class organizations like that, where they had actual chain link steel cages most of the time, which seemed to me more brutal, by the way. I know this is my favorite, but the steel chain link for me always just gave the appearance of being more brutal, especially especially during war games, NWA war games. Just, you had those two cages side by side and joined together, complete with roof. You always had, well, not always, but there was point in times where they would bring out like a head of cabbage or a head of lettuce, and they would rub it up, or cheese sometimes, and they would rub it up against the chain link fence to show what it does, and it shreds the cabbage or what have you. And it just gives you this visual that you can't escape after that. You're like, oh shit, like this is going to fuck you up. And you can't really do that with this very spacious steel cage here that's being used in this match. I mean, obviously the holes are way bigger, and although it is a steel cage and it is meant to keep the combatants inside, it just doesn't give off the same kind of vibe as a steel fence one does. So, but this match, I'm obviously, just like most everybody else, huge Stone Cold fan, And it's always entertaining to watch him, especially now since he's been out of the business for quite some time. I really do miss him, but I also think that if he were to be brought back in any capacity, like, his time is over with. His time is up, and it's just not the same. So why try to recreate that? Like, just let it be. Recently on Twitter, you had the Velveteen Dream tweet out something to the effect of, we're in the midst of a revolution, and I'm paraphrasing here, but we're in the midst of a revolution, and you have, the Attitude Era is dead, the 80s are dead, and let them stay dead. Like, it's our time now. And I completely agree with him. I know you old school fans out there are probably motherfucking me right now as we see Vince McMahon busted open finally, allowing Stone Cold to fulfill his promise here. We are in the midst of this awesome revolution in the pro wrestling industry. And yes, it's not the pro wrestling you grew up on, but it's not meant to be either. And I think a lot of people need to realize that. Like, the Attitude Era is over. Was it great? Of course it was great. But now we're on to something different. And if you don't like it, you don't like it, and you're more than entitled to an opinion. It is clearly a different beast, and for all the Joey Ryans that are out there, there are also Kenny Omegas out there. You can be mad, but in all honesty, you shouldn't be too mad. There's still guys out there still trying to push the envelope. There's still guys out there trying to tell stories. They're just doing it in a different way. And I think a lot of old school fans just immediately dismiss that. Like, oh, this is totally devoid of story. No, it's not. It's just done a different way now. And maybe you can't relate to that. And if you can't, that sucks. I mean, for you, not for me, because I can relate. I love stories in general, and I'm able to see the stories that are trying to be portrayed by today's professional wrestlers. So, there are times where, as much as I love Jim Cornette, Corny just doesn't get it right all the time. No one does, myself included. But I understand. I understand professional wrestling as it is being done today. I understand that it isn't the same thing as what agrees with Jim Cornette, but it's not meant to be. Here we have Stone Cold hitting Vince McMahon with his patented Stone Cold Stunner. That is another awesome episode of the Stone Cold podcast where he's talking to Kevin Owens. And they're kind of going back and forth about the usage of the stunner, because apparently he told Kevin Owens if he's ever going to use it in a match again, he needs to learn how to do it right, because there's a certain mechanics to it. It was a really fucking interesting episode, because it's a glimpse into technical wrestling from someone like Stone Cold Steve Austin, who you just don't think, you forget that he's such a great technical wrestler, because he was Stone Cold Steve Austin for a long period of time. Getting back to the match here, Paul White, everybody who knew back then as the Giant and now Big Show, makes his surprise debut, aiding Mr. McMahon here in the defeat of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And what can we say about Paul White? I'm assuming it was some sort of copyright issue where they could not use the Giant name, but I don't know that I would have called him by his name. I don't know what I would have did, but him coming in as just Paul White is a little bit underwhelming for me, because he clearly is an attraction. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's definitely one of the few attractions out there that was athletic enough to have another layer of depth to him and his persona, but don't let him come in here just as Paul White. Like, call him something else. I mean, I'm glad they came up with something like the Big Show or whatever, which I'm still not happy about. I think they could have come up with something a bit better, but yeah, they just refer to him here as Paul White. Although this all does backfire because he does throw Stone Cold Steve Austin against the cage. The cage ends up swinging open. One of the walls swings open. Austin falls to the floor and ends up winning the match. People are throwing shit at Paul White in the ring, which I don't know. I don't understand that. I mean, you've got Stone Cold clearly winning the match, and you got blood. He promised you blood from Mr. McMahon. You got it. So, guys, it has been a blast doing this episode, and again, Matt has the week off, and we hope he's getting some rest and some relaxation in as he takes a break. And this is gonna pretty much do it as they replay the ending of the match here. Thank you guys again for listening to the podcast and venturing along with us on our first watch along episode. Again, you have just watched WWF's In Your House, number 27, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, 1999. I hope we get to do this again. This was pretty cool. It was nice to shoot the shit with you guys and just talk some fucking wrestling. I really love to talk wrestling, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, we are available on social media really quick here. Facebook.com/20x20crew. You can catch us in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/20x20talk if you want to come shoot the shit with us on there. We share memes with each other, ask each other questions. I'm always trying to come up with shit to pick your guys' brains and get your opinions about stuff, because I'm a wrestling fan just like you guys are. We are also available on Twitter, over at twitter.com/20x20crew, or just at me at 20x20crew, or Madden, I should say. Come hate tweet us. Shouts out again to all the Twitter love out there, including Super Crazy and the king of death matches over there, Nick Gage. Dude, both of you guys, it's an honor. It's an honor that all of the pro wrestlers or pro wrestling organizations that follow us actually follow us. It's a cool little bit of validation there. Thanks for supporting the show. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/20x20crew, and we're also on YouTube, where we do the following contest, which is exclusive to YouTube. And it's where Matt and I take our favorite wrestlers or wrestling scenarios, and we book them, we fantasy book them, and try to come up with some interesting shit. I'm sure there's tons of stuff out there that you guys have not seen and would like to see, and that's what we do. We pick each other's brains for stuff that we would love to have seen happen or happen differently. So check that out over at 20x20crew.com/podcast/YouTube. It'll bring you straight to our channel. Hit that subscribe button for us, please. Every subscriber helps. And definitely check out some of the following contest. And as always, our home on the web is 20x20crew.com. I want to take the time to thank all the hardworking folks, the few of them that there are over at Paper Bullets Media, for allowing us to be a part of their network. For more information on Paper Bullets, you can get that over at paperbullets.site. That's .site, and you will see all of their shows, or all of their upcoming shows, right then and there on paperbullets.site. Again, Matt, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, I hope you're getting some R&R, brother. Definitely miss you. And happy anniversary to St. Valentine's Day Massacre. We hope you enjoyed this episode and your Valentine's Day. And until then, we will see you in the ring.